Okay. So I think 2:35 in German fashion. Let's get started here. We are recording this so we can post it on our website later in case people are not able to join us live here today. But what we want to talk about today, so this is the first in a series of webinars that the LRC at Cornell is putting on. And we're starting out with, so you decided to do Zoom, doing Zoom, what's next? Thinking about the first day of teaching online. We are in a very fortunate situation here at Cornell where we still have time to prepare our faculty before they start teaching on April 6th. So keep that in mind as we go through this presentation here. A few of the things that I want to touch on and talk about here: setting expectations for the new environment, preparing yourself, preparing your students, a quick note about some online tools and resources, and then also talking about building community. So, setting expectations. And I just want to make sure here that this is still working. Yes, okay. So in order to set expectations, a few considerations. We want to be realistic with what we do here. And now it doesn't work anymore here. Zoom, the insanity. So be realistic and also be reasonable. You don't want to overwhelm yourself with what you think you can do as you transition into this new virtual environment. So this is not going to be a one-to-one replication of what you do in a face-to-face environment. Keep that in mind. So having said that, I think the most important thing is to keep things simple. Don't try to introduce 500 new tools. This will overwhelm you. This will overwhelm your students. Prioritize what is important. Think about your syllabus. Think about your educational and pedagogical goals. And then think about what you can do in the online environment to meet those goals. And some things will fall by the wayside, and that is perfectly okay. Another important part about setting expectations is think about communication. What's your communication strategy? How will you communicate with your students? How will your students communicate with you? How is that flow going back and forth? And what are reasonable expectations in terms of when do you get back to your students? How many times per day do you expect them to check their email? How often will you check your email? So set boundaries for that and communicate all of those boundaries and expectations very clearly to your students. One quick note here about online etiquette. Now that we're moving to a completely virtual environment, some things as you get ready to teach, consider space. The space that you will be in and also the space that your students will be in. So think about lighting. Usually for you to be able to be clearly seen by your students, having front lighting is better than having back lighting. Think about noise. My home office here, I'm on a fairly busy street, so if there is a big truck rolling by, that will have an impact. So for that, and we'll get to that in a second, but for that it's always good to have maybe earbuds, ideally an external microphone if you have that at your disposal. And think about what your students, where they will be, and encourage them to be in a physical space that is conducive to learning when they log online to connect with you and with their classmates. Also consider internet connections. Depending on where your students are going and where they will be, they may not have high-speed internet available, or that they will be limited in terms of time when that is available. So just be mindful of some of those things and think about what can be done in an asynchronous fashion and what should be done synchronously. So the time, consider different time zones. Also time in terms of be respectful of your own schedule. You are not expected to be online 24/7 all of a sudden. So as I mentioned earlier, just communicate with your students what your response time will be, when you will be available online, when you have office hours, when they can drop in. So nobody is expecting you to respond to email any more expediently that you would traditionally in a regular face-to-face environment. I already mentioned, ideally, to encourage your students and also use yourself some earbuds and external microphone will reduce background noise and just make the learning experience a little bit more streamlined. And then also, depending on your class size and depending on what you are doing at any given point in time, if you are synchronously in Zoom, it's always best to ask your students to mute and unmute. So only unmute themselves when they're actually contributing. Of course, if you do that, then sometimes they might forget to unmute themselves and they keep talking and nobody can hear them. And in a large class, that can be tricky, that can be frustrating. I think in language classes in particular, we're a very social group, so we always like to see one another. So it's nice if the internet connection is stable enough to have our students have their video camera on, but sometimes that can be something where you may want to encourage them to turn it off as well. Our colleagues at Columbia University have created a very nifty little resource about do's and don'ts of online teaching with a lot of things talking about online etiquette. So that is also linked off of our LRC website. And once we put the slides on our LRC website, you can also connect directly to that resource. But some more considerations from the perspective of teaching, but I think that also applies to the perspective of learning. So that's something that you may want to share with your students as well. Now, how do you prepare yourself? Again, we at Cornell here are in a very fortunate situation that we have not started teaching online yet. So I cannot stress enough the importance to practice right now. A lot of our colleagues have been literally thrown into this with a day's notice, and nobody is going to become an expert in effective and engaging online teaching overnight. So play around with what you are going to be using right now. The LRC is at your disposal. We have our student assistants on standby if you need a mock class. That can be arranged. We have drop-in hours to online individual meetings if you have any specific questions or want to try something out. But practice now before we will actually reconnect with our students. That could mean that you may pre-record some videos and or prepare some annotated teaching notes that you plan on using once we do start teaching online. That also should mean that you should get your Canvas courses ready right now. So some things that you may want to think about doing is, are there any documents that you want to share with the students that aren't already up there? So your updated syllabus, certain homework assignments that you can lock down for now and then make available as time progresses. Start creating assignments on there. Move any paper-based quizzes or exams that you plan on giving later in the year online right now while you have a little bit more time. I already mentioned this next point here, but stick with what you and what your students know. So now is really not the time to start playing around with 15 new tools. And you will keep hearing about all these engaging applications, especially for language learning and teaching, and they're all great. But I think you want to make sure that you don't overwhelm yourself and put too much pressure on yourself trying to learn new technologies when you have so many other things to do as well. So think about what you will do synchronously versus asynchronously. So when are you meeting with the students at the same time in an online environment? And what are certain things that you want your students to do when they're working offline? And there are various ways of how you can engage your students in both of those modalities. And we will have some later webinars where we talk about how to best engage your students. Again, as a reminder for Cornell, the Vice Provost for undergraduate education reminds us that per week, the minimum of substantive contact between instructor and student should be 2 hours. So that can take various forms. That can mean you will connect with your students synchronously during your regularly scheduled class time on Zoom. Could also mean that you're all on Canvas during your regular class time. and you're engaging in discussion forums, or you're doing some other activities, or you can connect with students and be available for them via online office hours. But 2 hours is the minimum. And of course, we know for language learning, ideally, we will up that number and just hopefully maintain as much of our regularly scheduled class time as possible. But again, also don't put too much pressure on yourself if you may have to reassign sometimes and allow your students to engage with the course content and language practice in different ways. We were reminded from the university that you do need to do something during scheduled class times. It doesn't necessarily have to be a face-to-face class that takes place on Zoom, but when the class is scheduled, you should somehow have your students work on something. Again, that could be an offline writing assignment, or they can be in Canvas and do a discussion forum. You can have them work on shared Google Docs. There is a whole host of options that are at your disposal, and the LRC is happy to talk through some of them. But we just want to try to keep some sense of normalcy for our students, because they, of course, are in a similar situation to what we find ourselves in, where there are a lot of questions, a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. So I think giving them a somewhat regular schedule will help them navigate these uncertain times as well. And as you prepare yourself, just remember to be reasonable with what you expect from yourself. Be flexible and be patient with yourself and with everyone that you interact with. So we need to keep breathing. Now, in order to think about how you can prepare your students for the first day and for this new online environment, what we suggest is that once the teaching resumes online, survey your students and ask them basic questions so you have a better understanding of where they are and what kind of access they have. One thing to consider is students who live in a different time zone. It would be good for you to know what kind of internet access do your students have, only on their mobile devices, and if so, do they have an unlimited data plan? Do they connect at home through Wi-Fi, through a hardwired internet connection? Do they only have a mobile device? Do they have a computer? So we created a Qualtrics survey that was shared by our colleagues from Rutgers University, and we are more than happy to share that to your Qualtrics as well. So that asks all of those important and pertinent questions to help you get a better sense of where your students are in terms of their preparedness for online learning. And again, when we upload this, you can directly see that link here. Very important also, once you start teaching on April 6th, teach your students how to navigate and how to learn in this new online environment. We assume that they know everything and they know so much more about technology than we do. But anytime you introduce something new, we have to keep in mind that we as the instructors need to be trained, but we also have to ensure that all our students are trained, because some of them may not understand exactly how do you raise a hand in Zoom, or where is the chat feature, or how does this work, or how do you do that in Canvas. So take some time at the beginning of the online teaching experience and walk your students through everything. Practice a little bit, show them the different functionalities of the tools, and just give them time to get used to the environment as well. One thing that our students are very concerned about are their grades. So at Cornell, we were just told that for all courses for this semester, we do have an SU option available, so either satisfactory or unsatisfactory, or students can maintain to get a letter grade. This decision is left up to each individual student, and they have until April 21st to decide that. And the students have been receiving information about that from the registrar as well. Also, we just heard today that our semester has been extended by 1 week, and the updated academic calendar is posted on the registrar website, which is also linked on our slides here, and you can look at that once we post this presentation on our LRC website. Now, a few notes on online tools and resources as you are getting ready for moving into this online environment. Learning management system here at Cornell is Canvas, and we highly encourage you to make use of this, whether or not you have already been using this in your previous teaching experiences. It's a one-stop shopping for your students. It's a very easy way to share files with your students, to have synchronous and asynchronous meetings. So you can think about the affordances of what you can do in your learning management system. If you simply want to have a way to quickly share materials, handouts, your lecture notes, anything else pertinent to teaching, this file sharing can happen asynchronously. There are various ways within Canvas to have your students engage with one another and with you synchronously, for example, through discussions. And then you can also have certain timed experiences, quizzes and assignments that you can release, and you can schedule when those will happen. In Canvas, we also have a feature called conferences. This is somewhat similar to what Zoom is doing. The nice thing about conferences is that students can initiate these synchronous video conferences. So if you are interested in having your students do independent group work, that's something that they can initiate when they're all online in Canvas by themselves. So students can't initiate a Zoom conversation within Canvas. They can outside of Canvas through the regular Cornell the regular Cornell Zoom access. But if you want them to work within Canvas, and that way the system logs their activity and you can see how much time they've actually spent in your course, that could be one thing especially important for language practice if you want students to work together. Zoom, of course, everybody is relying on that. One thing that I wanted to mention is these awkward silences on Zoom. So if you ask students a question, again, think about this as a new environment. Students will take a little bit of time to get used to these synchronous conferences. And just like in your regular language classroom, if you ask a question, always wait a few seconds and give students time to think. Sometimes they may have to unmute their microphone, or sometimes a roommate might be, or a parent might be walking through their room and they don't want to say anything, especially if it's in a different language. So be okay with these silences. You may have heard people talk about decreasing the synchronous load. So a lot of institutions, a lot of businesses are relying on Zoom. And sometimes you may notice a lag in the transfer or the transmitting of the video feed. If that happens, encourage your students to turn off video. That will help with the connection. Or also something else to consider, you could have subsets of students that you work with in Zoom. So rather than having the entire class meet at the same time, group the students and meet with them separately. A few notes on other tools and applications. So we keep hearing about all these great online apps for language learning and teaching. Again, I don't think now is the time to start adding all of those. If you are interested in allowing your students to schedule one-on-one times with you for office hours, Calendly is a pretty neat tool where you can enter exactly how much time you have available in 10, 15, 30, however many minute increments. And once a student signs up for something, that integrates with your calendar, and then that time slot is no longer visible for anybody else. We are using that for all of our one-on-one training sessions at the LRC, and that's really been a lifesaver for us. Something else that we do recommend, if you are looking for something else that most students will already be familiar with, is Google Hangouts. That can be an alternative to Zoom as well, where you can connect online. But the university still suggests Zoom should be your #1 connection in conjunction with Canvas, and then anything else can just supplement what you can do within Canvas and Zoom. And I already mentioned this. pick tools and approaches that are familiar to you and your students. Now is not the time to completely reinvent the wheel. So if you are adding anything new, do it only when it's absolutely necessary and when you've had enough time to prepare yourself so that you can train your students in these new tools as well. So what will be really important in this new environment is to build community. We will also do another webinar about student engagement that will talk a lot about that. But one quick thing as you get ready for the first day, think about your profile in Canvas. So under your account, there is a profile setting here. And for instructors, generally the picture is automatically pulled from your HR records. But when you click on profile, you can provide contact information, you can add a little biography, you can also add links. So you can see that I have done none of these things in Canvas yet because I am in the fortunate position that I am not teaching this semester. But this is one way to make yourself more human and more approachable, to remind your students that you are an actual person, that you have interests. So this is one way to make this online environment a little bit more personable. So that's something that we would encourage you to do and also have your students do. One other thing to ensure is to do wellness checks on Canvas. So Canvas logs student activity, and we would encourage everybody to regularly check, especially if you notice that students have been missing certain assignments or certain synchronous class sessions. You can check exactly when students are on Canvas and how much time they spend. So check that every now and then, and if you notice that students are falling behind, simply reach out to them, send them an email, connect with them in other ways that you usually communicate with your students, but make sure that you reach out and double check that they're okay. We also want to keep engaging our students. So one suggestion was that you should have them turn something in every day. Of course, if you're only meeting once a week, then you probably don't have to have them turn something in every day. But make sure that they engage with the course content, with the target language every day. I mean, we know how important that is for continued advancement in language proficiency. These do not have to be graded homework assignments because, of course, we don't want to have you end up grading all day, every day. But just think about certain things, and sometimes it could be as simple as have your students send you the most surprising thing that happened in the online environment, or something new that they learned about Canvas or Zoom or learning online. Just little things to keep students engaged and to make sure that they're doing okay. I think something else that is important is to remember to be yourself. Again, this online environment is new, it can be scary, it can be very different from what you're used to. Cut yourself some slack, cut your students slack as well, and just be human, be compassionate, and be patient. So once we dive into this April 6th, day one of online teaching, a few things that you may want to do specifically to set the stage for the remainder of the semester. We talked already about how you should focus on familiarizing your students to the new environment. So actually take some time and maybe do a screen share in Zoom and walk them through Canvas and remind them where they can find all the different materials and how they should navigate, and if there are any new features that you enabled, just so they know where to find things. Very important also, talk about your expectations, both in terms of pedagogical goals, in terms of communication, and then leave time on that first day to answer questions. So we suggest that you don't dive right in and present a 60-minute lecture on Zoom on the first day, but take this first day very slowly to ease your students into this whole new environment. Talk about online etiquette, again, about your expectations, about do's and don'ts. And if there are any concerns about internet connection and things like that, reach out to CTI and CIT and see if and how they can be of help for things like that. and discuss your communication strategy. Make sure that your students understand what the expectations are, how they can get a hold of you, how they can connect with you, and how quickly you will respond to any inquiries. A few reminders. So Arts and Sciences sent out a survey about preparedness for teaching online to any language teaching faculty and teaching assistant. If you haven't already completed that, please do so by tomorrow, March 20th at 5 p.m. Very important for the college to ensure that everybody who is teaching online actually is ready to do so and has the right equipment. Also, as a reminder, our classes are indeed suspended until April 5th. So that means you should not be holding office hours. That means you should not be asking students to do any coursework right now. Of course, if students are reaching out to you and asking questions, please respond as best as you can or refer them to people who can answer their questions. Do remember to be kind to yourself and to your students. Be flexible, available, compassionate, and understanding. And then do take advantage of the resources and tutorials that we have posted on our LRC Google Drive. This is a growing list of resources. And also make sure to check out our preparedness website here at the LRC. Our webinars list is posted on there, additional information on how you can get a hold of us for live sessions, a lot of information about general technology and strategies, and then also a host of different resources for language learning and teaching online. And as a reminder, as we always say, keep calm and teach on, and that means for us online. So at this point, I am going to stop our screen share and we are going to entertain questions. And where did my tiles go? Here are the tiles. Excellent. Do we have any questions? Or comments?
Great presentation, much appreciated. Just one thought maybe from everyone, as far as keeping in touch with students. Well, I guess not everybody is up Cornell, so, but I want to, it's a delicate thing in that we've been told not to hold formal sessions with our students, which I totally understand, to wait until classes reconvene on April 6th. But I'm considering the option for students to work ahead. In other words, making certain assignments available, not expecting they're going to do them at all, but if they want to do them, especially because Canvas I've really found to be an excellent tool for allowing a self-paced, type of approach. So is this advisable or not advisable? Again, I'm setting the due date such that I'm not expecting them to do anything until we reconvene, but if they're bored and they're ambitious, at least to a certain point, allowing them to complete certain assignments self-paced, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think it would be nice to maintain exposure and to continue to allow students to engage with language and culture and content, right? So one thing that I think you may want to be cautious about is having them work ahead and do new things. So, I think you can give them assignments to work ahead, but there should definitely not be an expectation that they will do that. So I think reframing that and allowing them to review and repeat what has already been done. So we did add one additional week to the semester, so hopefully that will offset the 1 week that we are effectively then losing. And of course, the course schedule will have to be adjusted because we can't just one-for-one continue to do what we have been doing in the regular face-to-face environment. So I think making materials available to your students and telling them, hey, there are these assignments or activities or tasks on Canvas, you can certainly do that. And I think in languages, we are always or generally in a slightly different situation because our students are very motivated and they want to continue to engage with the material. So oftentimes I think they're willing to do something right now. And a lot of them, if they've already settled in wherever they are bored out of their minds. So I think it would be nice to help them structure their days and give them something meaningful to do. Just make sure that you don't expect everybody to, have acquired new knowledge once you do start on April 6th.
Yeah, I know that's good. The opportunity, as you put it, for the review is really a good one too, because some of them really need that. And so without learning anything new on their own, there's plenty of time to just provide exercises, so to speak, to either design or find elsewhere. And because sometimes they're very self-motivated, but they don't know where to look for the best exercises to reinforce what they've already learned.
Exactly. Well, and I think that goes for faculty right now too, right? There are just, I think one thing we want to be careful about is that we don't overwhelm students. I know a few of the faculty members that I've spoken with, they don't even know. There are so many Facebook groups that all of a sudden popped up, and what's legit, what's not legit, and what is a good approach and what is a good tool, and how do you decide these things. So I think in this case, sometimes less is more. And so if you can provide a few resources, either that you generated yourself or that are good sources to continue with Latin, then do it. I mean, I don't think the university is telling us that we can't communicate with the students at all, right? I think it's just making sure equity is maintained, that everybody has equal access to this, and while students are in transit, that may not happen. And it may not even happen equally when students are in their at their permanent addresses or wherever they go. So
good. Yeah, thanks.
Any other comments or thoughts?
I just have a question about the access that some students will have to the internet. This is what worries me a little bit, and actually it worries me for myself a little too, because I don't have regular access. I use my phone to have access to the internet.
Oh wow!
Because it's less expensive, and before I never really needed real access.
Of course.
So my phone works really well in general. Like there's never any problems. But obviously, like sometimes uploading like very large files can take a really long time. But for the kind of files that we are sending, I think it should be fine. But I'm thinking that probably a lot of students are going to be in this situation. Like they don't necessarily have an access that is like perfect. So what advice do you have for that?
So I think the first thing is to find out what the student's access is. And again, in the survey that we can share with you, so you can just use that, copy that into your own Qualtrics. That is one question, just so you have a better sense of how they will connect. And if you know that there are a lot of students who are in the same situation that you are in, where they would be using mobile data, keep that in mind as you restructure how you deliver content. So that would mean that you probably shouldn't record 50-minute lectures and then upload them. And I think with video in general, so if you do think about using the time that we have before we start to pre-record certain, if you want to introduce new vocabulary or new grammatical structures or whatever it may be, new cultural topics, you can do the flipped approach. You can record them right now and upload them. And depending on how confident you feel about going back to campus, campus is not closed. So you could right now go back to your office, record those things there, have all of that ready, have all of it in Canvas, and have it ready to be released, whenever you wanted to. Or, I mean, that's something that you could easily do with your mobile data. That doesn't take a lot to change the check mark on Canvas so that things become visible to students. And that way,
I already went to campus to scan a lot of stuff, but
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this is a personal preference too, right? Do you even want to be out and about right now? But if you are okay with going to campus, campus will also remain, I mean, for now, who knows, will remain open once we go back into teaching. So you could go back to your office. That, of course, doesn't help with the question of what do students do. So I think just the first step is finding out what their situation is. And then if you know that there may be students who don't have high-speed internet or only have very limited access, prioritize and think about what are the most important things. And then think about how you can maybe shift more to asynchronous to allow individuals to log on maybe, when not everybody else is on and there's a whole lot of drag on data. But yeah, those are valid and good considerations, and we don't really have a perfect answer. Depending on where students are, a lot of internet providers are making high-speed internet available for free for educational institutions to students through the end of the school year. So that's something that the students should check locally as well with, whatever the internet provider is that they have at home, assuming there is somebody who has a Wi-Fi. Matt?
Actually, just two things I'll say. Number one, I know about Cornell, the students at Cornell, but I know that the Comcast is actually even offering low-cost computers to students or to people in general, I think for $149.
And we'll never know what else he has to say.
Too bad.
I was hanging on the edge of my seat. I mean, this is all about.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I heard 149. That got me.
Lost you guys,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Matt, you dropped off after 149. Computers are available for 149.
Comcast is selling computers for $149 as well as like low price. But the first comment I was going to make was, as you guys are doing this survey, and I don't know if it's part of this survey that you were looking at, one of the problems, because we've started already, obviously, doing the online classes, one of the issues that we're sort of running into is people who are going back to their home countries who governments don't allow for Zoom. So I know I have one student from the UAE, and apparently they're not allowing Zoom in the UAE. So I'm not sure what we're going to do with this kid yet, but just this might be something you want to take into consideration as you're doing your surveys.
Yeah, so the survey that we currently have just asked for time zone. Maybe that's a question to add. Sam or John, can you make
I know
a
that
note?
Zoom in particular has a, I can send you the link, I have it, like Will It Work Internationally?
Yeah. Well, so here is one thought, and this is actually something that the university is asking everybody to do. If you meet with your students synchronously on Zoom, the expectation is that you will record that session. Because we don't know if all students can connect synchronously at the same time with you. So I mean, if you meet with them for office hours, that's between you and a student, of course, that you don't have to capture. But if there is anything where you introduce new material, if it's also something where students practice, engaging with languages amongst themselves, I don't think that's something that you need to record. But anytime you present something new, you have to record that, and then you have to share that with the students. And so, Matt, that could be something that you share through different channels with that student in the UAE, right? Can you still post that on P2L if they have P2L access?
The media space and everything, Hey, just one other comment that just made me think of this. I don't know how much experience you guys have with using Zoom or with breakout rooms. But typically in in just a quote unquote normal classroom, you might have a PowerPoint where a slide comes up and here's the activity. So, okay, everybody break into groups of 2 or 3, up here is the activity and the students can follow what they're supposed to do during that activity. When you use breakout rooms on Zoom, the PowerPoint doesn't get shared. So we've discovered it takes a little bit of extra preparation you either have to share your slides ahead of time, and what I've recommended to our TAs is number them so you can say, okay, on slide 15, here's the activity, and or simply copy it to a Word document or something and send it out ahead of time. So these are like these little wonderful things that we've discovered, like sort of as we're going along. We're like,
Sure,
okay,
sure.
breakout rooms, do the activity,
Yeah.
and we don't know what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. And we are doing in our webinar series, we will have one webinar specifically talking about breakout rooms and then also about some of the other Zoom features. But I think in general, this is something that we covered in our previous webinar too. I think, Matt, you make a very good point here that it is so important to share anything and everything that you are willing to share ahead of time. So if you know, and I mean, sometimes that's tricky, right? Because you don't want students to jump ahead in the PowerPoint presentation that you prepared. But I think—
Can I interrupt you for a second though? But I think you bring up, I think this brings up a really, really excellent point, and that is, because the situation is so unique, we really have to sort of change what our expectations are. And you're right. So for example, in my PowerPoints, typically I'll have them do an activity and then I'll have the answers. And I simply told them, just don't look at they're there, you know they're there, don't look at them, do the activity first. And if they do, they do. I mean, but you know,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think sometimes we just, I think we just have to sort of change our expectations. So I don't want to monopolize anymore, but.
Yeah, no, and I mean, this is great because you're in the situation that we will all find ourselves in 2 weeks. So if you have any other, like, you know, thoughts or things that we should keep in mind and share with our folks here of do's and don'ts and like things that you didn't think about, or, you know, please.
Yeah, I think just as a general thing, like I said, it's, you know, I think for so many people, there's this, especially maybe in administration, there's a sort of,
and again, we'll never know.
I think I cut out again.
Yeah, in administration, there is a sort of—
Sorry, the crappy internet here in East Lansing. This sort of attitude that there's this giant switch that you can flip from, you know, in person to online, and everything is the same. And we know that that's not the case. So I think in large part, what it simply means is you're just gonna have to say, hey, I really would like to do this, but it's not possible. Another example is, and I don't know if you guys at Cornell have discussed this, but notions of attendance. Right? Can you, and so, you know, what do you do about tests? And, you know, there were some people that, well, they can just sit in front of their computer and take the test and we can monitor them. But immediately that starts to raise a million different questions. You know, what about time zones? And what if someone goes back to China and your class is at 3 p.m. and it's 3 a.m. for them? Is it reasonable to say somebody has to take an online test at 3 o'clock in the morning? Also, what if you're in a rural area where you just don't get internet, or you're in the UAE where you know, and so it brings up a million questions. And, you know, at least for us, while putting a test, for example, on D2L or Canvas, you know, and having them take it, you know, is maybe not ideal. Maybe that's what needs to get done because this is such a unique situation. And it's almost kind of like, you know, in optimality theory and, you know, phonology, right? You know, you have all these, you know, possibilities, which is simply the least bad that we have to
exactly
use. So.
And that's why it's so important to think right now about what are your expectations. What's the most important thing in terms of student learning that you want your students to be able to achieve in the time that we have left in the semester? And then once you've identified that, probably cut that by half.
Yeah.
Right? Be realistic. And if something doesn't get done, doesn't get accomplished, then it is what it is. I mean, we're all in the same situation. It's not like, you know, I mean, this is global. So it's not like American students are going to lag behind this year because we were at a disadvantage. Everybody is exactly in the same situation. So I think just, yeah, being flexible, knowing that this is not going to be the same experience, and just trying our best, right? I think that's the way forward.
That's a good advice, I think.
Yeah, and we have to really take deep breaths. And encourage our students to do the same. I mean, they're concerned, they're scared. And I think whatever we can do. So that's why also making sure on that first day, ease them into this. Don't right away start with a 37 question quiz, right? So ease them into the whole new environment and let them know that, especially for us, we have the option of an SU grade. So if they are super concerned about completely dropping out, or if they don't have internet access, right, there will be accommodations that will be made.
For what it's worth, I also think that getting them into some kind of routine. I mean, when I taught yesterday, we finished and I had a few minutes left, and I just said, so how's everybody feeling? How is this working for you? What are your concerns and everything? But one of my students said that she really appreciated that we were still meeting at 10:20 on Mondays and Wednesdays, and that it gave some kind of, now again, there are others that can't do that, but for those that can, which gets back to the whole attendance thing, is it reasonable to expect? But anyway, that's aside. But it was just this notion of routine, that it was some level of normality that the student appreciated, and probably others did too, I would guess. So
yeah.
So
Awesome.
I'm gonna go back
Thank
to my
you.
French cafe and have a cafe and
Yes, you do that. Matt, thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences. This is really helpful for us to hear how this is already working at different institutions.
yeah, it's kind of like the blind leading the blind right now, but
Well, and Claire and Dan, if you guys have any questions or anything specific related to your courses, let us know, reach out to us, tell your colleagues too. We are here and we're happy to do whatever we can to support you guys to be ready for April 6th and beyond.
Thank you. Well, bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Take
All the
care,
best.
guys.
See you soon. Bye-bye. I hope. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Angelika.
Bye, Matt. Good to see you.
You too.